as 2020 winds down, I'm going to agree with the inventor of the 5-second rule, Mel Robbins. Be careful in thinking that some digits changing on a clock is going to magically make the world that is today disappear. Like how the world changed post 9/11, I think the world has changed post-pandemic, if and when we ever arrive at that time. Part of the reason that I've stayed somewhat okay during this year is because I've pivoted. Instead of staking my happiness on a life that might have ended, I'm doubling down on things I know are possible today, like breakdancing, dancing, and creativity. Some who know me know that I'm very outright, forthright about what I think. And that's true. So where's my activist energy now? Another thing that's true about me is I think I know where to invest my energy. And that's a uniquely personal decision to make. I applaud and support people who are activists and support and applaud their right to freedom of speech. I myself exercise my freedom of speech a lot on my social media, but as for doing it on the streets, I've rarely done so except for the odd protest here or there. The last one that I attended was the anti-Trump rally in downtown Vancouver, 2017, January. Even then, was that the thing to protest against, per se? Because as of our current world, being someone who's explored 101 countries, I know well enough that genocides, slavery, rape is happening today, December 23rd, 2020, in this world. So the answer is complex. And I've decided that the best way to invest my time is to invest in ways to make me personally happy. Because luckily for me, what makes me personally happy comes at nobody else's expense. I have a couple of studio spaces outdoors that I've converted into my dance studios, and I rotate between them depending on the external weather circumstances. I prefer this studio the most, but sometimes the rain renders it too slippery. And even sometimes I'll still do it as an adventure activity. Do I sometimes injure myself? To be honest, for the extreme activities that I've done, I've actually only injured myself minorly a handful of times since recovering from my debilitating back injury, the one that caused me to completely change and reevaluate my life. Today, I have bruised knees because I slipped and fell while dancing in the dark on this slippery patio. So yes, I introduced some anarchy in fun ways for myself, and I'm only minorly injured, so it's only a half excuse for whatever poor performance I have today. But back to what to invest your time in, this is an extremely personal decision, because what I'm attempting to do or want to do would have to change the minds and policies of 93 other UN countries in this world, most of them being difficult at best and downright atrocious at worst. So this is going to be a long-term evaluation for me regarding adventure travel. I've mentioned before that the only real achievement that I invested time into was to explore all 7 continents with my mom and bro. And I've done that already, as of 2015. So anything after that has been just more of the same but different. That's the thing. At what point do I collapse because too many constraints have been placed? And this is a personal decision. How many constraints are too many constraints? Each person has to decide for themselves. For me, I think there's way too much for me to do personally, so that I'll wait, and I might actually have to deflect into other activities that'll come back online faster than adventure travel. What are the activities? Right now, it's just stuff that's within my control. Creativity. So have I had trouble day by day motivating myself to dance? Yes, I have. Some days have been really difficult. Actually, the last couple of days have been such, where somehow I brute force myself. And the thing is, when I'm forcing myself, it's still a level of want and desire in me that's a lot greater than anything I've ever experienced in performing for others, i.e. working as a slave laborer. So whenever I have difficult days, I remind myself that regardless of how tough it might be to encourage my lard body out of the bed, it's better than any other day I've spent toiling under the thumb of someone else. Yeah, I've had to think a lot about this, because this morning I've delved into an interview with Yoonmi Park, a North Korean defector. She's now an activist in the US. She has many important big ideas, some which challenge us as a society, especially in what we would call free countries. But then the thing that I've been struggling with myself during the pandemic and before is, what is freedom? What does that even mean? Do we truly have it? When we think of freedom, we're always thinking about government oppression, but what about evolutionary oppression. We're oppressed by our very natures because of the nature of our DNA and our societies and our environments. So, a lot of what I've done since becoming an adventure traveler is trying to unravel those influences from me and ask whether there is a separate me from the me that is a socially constructed meat puppet, as Dr. Professor Sheldon Solomon would describe. I'm trying to decide which one do I like better. Dr. Sheldon Solomon's socially constructed meat puppet, or Dr. Richard Dawkins' throwaway survival machine. I think depending on my mood, I use both of them in the same sentence. I am both a socially constructed meat puppet and a throwaway survival machine for the genes which I contain. Okay. Today is supposed to be a new breakdancing routine, and I think that's probably better than attempting more dancing today because I have danced through injury, and I'm wondering if that's the rightish thing to do. I've already mentioned that Firaz Zahabi, George St. Pierre's head trainer and overall badass athlete and martial artist, has suggested that you actually train less than you think, especially if you're one of those beast mode trainers, because if you can establish consistency, that's better than blowing yourself out, for example, 8 hours in one day and having to recover days and days afterwards. The math basically works out to, if you do a consistent number almost every day, is better than blowing yourself out and having tons and tons of rest days in between to recuperate your blown out self. So I've actually largely followed his advice, and I've tried to tailor what I'm doing to be less intense, but we're starting to move away from just top rocking and into some of the more dynamic, flashy breaking elements. Those are going to require some bruises, probably, some falling, and that'll be the way it is, I guess. The floor's still damp, but I'll work with it. hands are cold. I'm touching that bottom. I'm take a brief break because I let that song run a little long. I'm also adapting to the outdoors. As many people know, I was born in a cold province, the good old province of Alberta. So I'm used to this kind of nippy cold, and I like to perform in the cold. In fact, when I performed my PADI open water dives to get licensed, I actually dived in a wetsuit in October, in the fall, as opposed to in the summer, or it was the end of September. In any case, I dived in Vancouver, cold water, in the fall with a wetsuit instead of a dry suit. So I'm cool performing in the cold, but I still probably need a little bit of an adaptation period because the sun's really setting early. It's setting before 4:30 p.m. now. Last I checked, I think it's probably around 4:15 p.m. I've had to check now because I'm timing my vlogs for the optimal time. For example, last night we contended with rain, so I wanted to allow the patio enough time to dry before I attempted, but I also want to dance before the sun sets. So back to what was it? My rants, my activist rants that only stay in vlogs. Knowing how to be effective with your time and energy is difficult because a person like me wants to fight every battle, at least the ones that concern me. But I also know that that's a difficult way to live. I remember an instance in Jordan where at Petra there's a ledge that you can semi-hike, rock climb up to. A local vagabond, who knows, just has planted himself on that ledge, and he charges people a nominal $1 to view the treasury of Petra from that ledge. The funny thing is, for me, whether you charge $1 or a cent, the question is, why is this guy doing this, and does he have the right? Did he buy this ledge? What's going on here? You'd think I'm the only person who questions this, but someone else did too. Actually, someone else's. Two Eastern European ladies in front of me actually argued with him about this. While he was distracted with them, I had a brief moment to breathe in the view before he had turned his attention to me. I had a couple of options. I could have just paid him $1 to go away. Part of the problem in these developing countries, and this is a travel tip, is that people are observing what you're doing. So even if you think you're just taking out $1 here or there, pickpockets and skilled thieves are watching you. They're watching, where do you put your money? Are you paying attention? Blah, blah, blah. If you're prepared with a couple of dollars free and handy, that's great. But sometimes you've used those for other things already. So, do you reach into your pocket? Do you fight with him? Or do you just go one stone lower and observe the view where he's outside of range, I guess? He has his own personality, ethics, rules that he's following. Because he had this ledge, but if you step down on this ledge, you have exactly the same view without the problems. So, funny thing would be, a person close to me who hiked up that ledge with me asked, why are you wasting your time even engaging him? The two Eastern European ladies engaged him. They were nary to change his mind, so they turned around. What makes you think you would have been able to successfully convince him? Especially if you think about it from his point of view. Even if he lacks the technical property right to that ledge, he's there already. And are you going to waste your valuable time in Jordan, at Petra, at this Indiana Jones monument, to fight with a guy over a concept where he probably has little to no idea what you're talking about? And that's a good point. And that's where I fight with myself often, because that's a waste of energy. Now, part of the reason why is that's been a long-running thing with me in the Middle East. This is less about a man on a ledge and more about the way men in the Middle East think of women in general. That was on the back end of a particularly trying set of countries. Israel, Egypt, and Jordan, country 99, 100, and 101. And I think that was one of those straws breaking the camel back moments. Something about it just set me off. But that's an example of where I ask myself, what's worth my time and energy? And this is hard to know the answer, because looking back, maybe I've wasted energy in places where I should have saved it. And this is an active question for me. What am I doing? That'll be something that I continue to ask myself into the new year, and maybe that's something that I set as a standard for myself, to have more clarity about this issue, because it's been something that I've been thinking about quite a lot. Okay. Shall I dance more? I'll dance a little bit more to another song. It's really slippery. This floor's slippery, and my floor work is having a tough time today. So, in any case, this is one of those reflexive days where Mel Robbins invented 3-2-1 good, and I, as a child, invented something called 1-2-3 good. I often joke that if I had just been smart enough to reverse it, that I could have marketed the idea to such prominence as Mel. But in any case, the point is that the new year is just a switch of digits. The world will be what it is, and I have that active fight in me as to what's the best way to deal with it. Do you resist? Do you adapt? Do you do a combination of both? Maybe in this situation, adapting is resisting. Who knows? It's hard to know. But I think part of the reason why I'm in a unique position is that I'm really practicing what I've preached before, which is I lived my life in such a way that if things were to end at any time, end being the final ultimate death end, or end being something else, I'd be happy with what I accomplished up to that date. And that's largely been true. I think part of the reason why I've been able to concentrate more on adapting to the constraints is because I'm happy with what I've done. I've really no regrets. I think I did and have done about as good as I can have done in the world we live. That's the part that's always important. There can be the grand dreams, the grand scale, and then there can be what can happen in reality. When I used to plan trips, I would plan what I call pie in the sky way out there. And that would usually involve such concepts as Africa is just a short ferry ride away from Europe. And then once you're in Africa, this country's next to that country, which is next to that country, which is next to that country. And the difficult part was always paring it down to something realistic that I can actually do in real life. So after that golden age of travel, 8 years or so, the world has changed and there are more constraints. So what do I do then? I'm currently in that holding pattern of just adapting. How long that's going to last is hard to know. All I know is that the switch of digits is just a switch of digits. Will that be the thing that spurs me? I doubt it. Probably be something else that spurs me. It is what it is. Huh. That's the end of that song. It is what it is.